G'day, folks. This is a special one today. I'm talking to Cyrus Khambatta from Mastering Diabetes. He has a huge amount of knowledge as well as experience in himself in dealing with diabetes. He's got a PhD on the topic, and he really knows his stuff, and he's going to help you guys get over diabetes. I get messages every day from people asking me about diabetes and how potatoes help or otherwise, perhaps. And it's a question that I deal with all the time, and I'm going to be from now on sending people to this video to figure out how diabetes works and how you can solve it. So Cyrus is a wealth of knowledge, and I hope you guys will share this with anyone you know who deals with diabetes and needs to learn more about it. So without further ado, over to Cyrus. G'day everyone, welcome back to Spud Fit. I've got a special guest today. Every single day I get emails and social media questions from people who want to know more about how Spud Fit is going to affect diabetes. I'm hearing from diabetes is a big issue, and I'm hearing from people all the time who want help with it. So today I've got maybe one of the leading diabetes researchers and experts in the world to help us with it. So over to Cyrus Khambatta. Did I pronounce your last name right?
You got it right. You nailed it. Khambatta. That's the right way.
Right. So, welcome, Cyrus, and thank you for joining us. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me here today. I mean, you're right. Diabetes has become kind of a big deal in today's world, and there's more people being diagnosed with all forms of diabetes today than there ever has been in human history. I am one of those people. So when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2002, so that was like 18 years ago, and I was just graduating college at that time, just trying to move on with my life. I got diagnosed with not only type 1 diabetes, but actually 3 autoimmune conditions. So the first one is Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which basically decreases my thyroid hormone output. The second one is alopecia areata or alopecia universalis, which is why, as you can see, I have no hair, I have no eyebrows, no eyelashes, none of that. And then the third one was type 1 diabetes. And the kicker was that all 3 of those set in within a 6-month period. And even the doctors at that time were like, we've never seen this before. I don't know what to tell you. But they did tell me to eat a low carbohydrate diet because that's the sort of like prevailing wisdom in the world of diabetes. So I did that. And I started eating a low carbohydrate diet. Turkey burgers, peanut butter, chicken, fish, meat, milk, cheese, right? And I was trying to limit my intake of rice and potatoes and fruits because that's what I was told to do. And that's what the diabetes world believes to be the solution for controlling blood glucose properly. So I did that for a year. It was supposed to make my blood glucose pretty controllable, but it didn't do that. It did the opposite. My blood glucose was a joke. It was all over the place. High, low, high, low, high, low. And when I say high, low, I mean, in our imperial units, it's supposed to keep your glucose between 70 and 130. And my glucose was, it could be as low as 50, it could be as high as 350, right? So in your guys' units, I don't know the exact conversion off the top of my head right now, but it's like an 18-to-1 conversion. So basically, my glucose would vary from like a 2.5 millimolar all the way upwards of like a 16 millimolar. And that was happening on a daily basis. And it was just like, it was insane. So point being is I transitioned to eating a plant-based diet back in 2003 when it was not cool. Nobody I knew was doing it. It wasn't popular. It wasn't fun. It was just like, I was doing it literally to save my own life. Right. And I started to adopt a plant-based diet and I noticed incredible changes in my overall health. So within the first week of doing so, my glucose fell dramatically. So I was riding high a lot of the time and my glucose levels came down in the fasting state while I was sleeping, while I was exercising. My insulin use came down by 40%, despite the fact that I was eating more carbohydrate. And this was kind of like a big epiphany for me where I was like, wait a minute, the plant-based diet that I was eating was full of carbohydrate. You couldn't escape carbohydrates if your life depended on it, right? I was eating lots of mangoes and papayas and bananas and dates and apples and oranges. And as a result of that, my carbohydrate intake went upwards of like 600 grams a day. 600 grams a day, which is what, your average person with diabetes would eat in like a week. And I was doing that every 24 hours, right? And you would expect that because my glucose or my carbohydrate intake was so high, that my insulin use would start to climb as well, but it went down. It went the opposite direction. So I was eating 600 grams of carbohydrate and I was using 40% less insulin. And I was like, well, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that like what I'm experiencing is the exact opposite of what I was told would happen and what millions of people around the planet are told. So long story short, I put myself back to graduate school. I went and I got a PhD in nutritional biochemistry because I wanted to be able to talk science. And in so doing, I learned that the experiment that was underway in my own body has actually been studied and tested rigorously in the scientific literature since the 1920s. I kid you not, like 100 years worth of research. And scientists have known for the longest time that eating a plant-based diet that is low in fat containing whole foods is a tremendously powerful way for controlling your blood glucose and losing weight and dropping your cholesterol and dropping your blood pressure, and the list goes on. I was just, one person that had experienced that. And so I turned it into my objective to try and teach the people, living with all forms of diabetes, how they can also make that same transition. So Robby Barbaro, who's my co-founder, him and I both have type 1 diabetes, and we have more than 36 years of experience living a plant-based diet. So we teach people with type 1, type 1.5, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, gestational diabetes, how to transition to a plant-based diet and how to get incredible results in a very short period of time. It's been really fun so far.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I've seen lots of your testimonials and you get some really incredible results. So
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I experience it as well. I get plenty of incredible results from diabetics as well. Before we go further, it's important to make sure that people understand what the difference is between type 1, type 2, and type 1.5. You mentioned as well, which most people are not familiar with. So can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll try and keep this relatively short, but there's multiple forms of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a autoimmune version of diabetes. What that means is that your own immune system attacks and kills the insulin producing beta cells in your pancreas. Type 1 diabetes, generally speaking, happens in people under the age of 30. And it used to be called juvenile onset diabetes because it usually affected 2, 5, 10, 8-year-old kids. But now it's starting to affect a larger proportion of the population and also affect people as they get older towards the age of 30. So that's type 1 diabetes. In type 1 diabetes, because you lose your ability to secrete insulin, you must inject insulin from the outside world. What that means is that when you're eating meals and sort of, at various points throughout the day, you have to inject insulin in order to try and control your blood glucose and mimic the action of what your pancreas used to do. That's a simple way to think about it. Okay.
So as a type 1, we often talk about if you eat a whole food plant-based diet, you're going to get off your medication and all that sort of stuff, and and all that. If as a type 1, you're not going to get off your insulin, but you're going to reduce the amount that you can use. Is that?
Yes. Very good distinction. Thank you for bringing that up. You cannot reverse type 1 diabetes. As of today, 2020, the scientific world does not know how to reverse type 1 diabetes. So just like you said, if you adopt a whole food plant-based diet that is low in fat, what happens is that you reduce the amount of insulin that's required for you to inject on a daily basis, and your glucose becomes more controllable. And as a result of that, your quality of life goes up dramatically. So you're reducing your insulin exposure, you're getting more controllable blood glucose, but then in addition, you get more energy and you can sleep better and your skin clears up. And a whole host of improved health benefits come along for the ride in addition to diabetes.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so then we have type 1.5 diabetes. 1.5 is what is type 1 diabetes in adults over the age of 30. That's a simple way to think about it.
Oh, okay.
So if you have autoimmune diabetes and you were diagnosed after the age of 30, then chances are you have what's called type 1.5. Type 1.5 is characterized by a later onset, plus it's usually considered like a weaker form of type 1 diabetes. And you produce less antibodies to the beta cells in your pancreas, and it's sort of like a slower progressing version of type 1 diabetes. Okay? Now, pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes, those are the types of diabetes that affect 92% of the diabetes population.
Yeah.
Those are the forms of diabetes that you induce from your lifestyle. So the way that this whole thing unfolds is that you first develop one condition called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance then progresses to pre-diabetes. Prediabetes then progresses to type 2 diabetes. So it's a 1, 2, 3 step process. And it happens in that order, and you cannot change the order of events.
Yeah.
In other words, in order to become pre-diabetic in type 2, you have to first develop insulin resistance. So you can really think of pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes as basically being like an advanced form of insulin resistance, because that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
And by adopting a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, what we do is we specifically target insulin resistance and make you more insulin sensitive. And as a result of that, the symptoms of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes tend to go away. And those symptoms are things like high blood glucose, or being overweight, or having low energy, or having high triglycerides, or having high cholesterol. So all of those symptoms tend to go away over the course of time. And prediabetes and type 2 diabetes are technically reversible conditions. And that happens in like 80 to 90% of all cases.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible how seemingly simple and easy it is to reverse these conditions that are so, prevalent and causing such chaos really in so many people. So can you talk a little bit about what the actual mechanism is that causes that insulin resistance? Like what is going on, and why is it that a high fat diet tends to promote insulin resistance?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, most people in the world of diabetes, if you ask them what causes insulin resistance, they're going to say sugar. Yeah. They say sugar causes diabetes. Sugar causes insulin resistance. Or they'll even say carbs, carbohydrates, that causes insulin resistance. And unfortunately, that is not a true statement. Okay. The real cause of insulin resistance is actually an excess accumulation of fatty acids in tissues that are not designed to store large quantities of fatty acids. So what that means is that in your body, you have many tissues that require either fatty acids or amino acids or glucose for energy. Okay, so your adipose tissue, or your fat tissue, okay, it's a tissue that's perfectly designed to run off of fatty acids and to store fatty acids for energy for long periods of time until your tissue is asked upon to release those fatty acids to donate to other tissues. Okay, so you can think of your adipose tissue as basically being like a Costco warehouse or a PriceSmart warehouse of fatty acids. That's exactly what it's designed for. Okay, when you eat a diet that's high in fat, what ends up happening is that the fat molecules that come into your mouth, they come in the form of triglyceride. Inside of your digestive system, the triglyceride is broken apart into fatty acids. Those fatty acids then get absorbed through the walls of your small intestine. They make it into your blood. And then once they're in your blood, they use your blood as a highway to get to tissues. So those fatty acids can get into your adipose tissue, and that's where they're designed to be stored and kept over a long period of time. But those fatty acids can also get inside of your liver, and they can also get inside of your muscle. And that's okay if those fatty acids get inside of your liver and muscle, but in small quantities, because that's how those tissues are designed to operate. The problem of diabetes and insulin resistance begins when the amount of fat that goes into your mouth overloads the amount of fat that you can store inside of your muscle and liver. Okay, so when you're consuming a high fat diet, whether it's like a paleo diet or a ketogenic diet, which is all the rage these days, okay, or just a typical low carbohydrate diet, which people with diabetes are told to eat, they're constantly eating higher fat foods, whether they're from plant-based sources like avocados and nuts and seeds and olive oil, or whether it's from animal-based sources like chicken and meat and fish and dairy. Okay, regardless, however those fatty acids come into your mouth, the more fatty acids that come into your mouth, the more opportunity those fatty acids have to get inside your adipose tissue and then also inside of your muscle and liver. So when your muscle and liver end up accumulating too much fat inside of those two tissues in particular, what they want to do is basically block those fatty acids from coming in and say, okay, hold on, time out. Like I'm storing more than I want to be storing. Please stop coming in the tissue. The problem is that both of those tissues don't have a good way to do that. The actual mechanism to block fatty acids from coming in is just not very sophisticated. So as a result, those tissues can't really block those fatty acids from coming in. But what they can do is they can block glucose from coming in, because glucose is another form of energy. So what they do is they institute this thing called insulin resistance. It's a self-protective mechanism. where cells inside of your liver and muscle basically say, okay, here we go. If we block insulin from communicating with us, then we can block glucose from coming inside of these cells. And that's a good thing because it'll prevent more energy from coming inside. So they do that, and they basically block insulin from effectively working on those tissues. They don't fully block it, but they inhibit insulin's action. And as a result of that, the next time you eat something that's carbohydrate rich, like a banana or a potato or a bowl of quinoa, anything that contains carbohydrates, the carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. The glucose comes and knocks on the door of the tissue, says, hey, can I get inside? Can I get inside? I want to get inside. And insulin basically says, hey, knock, knock, there's glucose in the tissue. Would you like to take it up? And those tissues respond by saying, no, 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 no. Remember that whole insulin resistance thing, which I created? I'm not going to take this stuff up right now. I'm going to block insulin. I'm not going to pay attention to you. And as a result of that, glucose remains trapped inside of your blood. Insulin remains trapped inside of your blood. And as a result of that, you become what's called hyperglycemic and hyperinsulinemic. Too much glucose, too much insulin. So what that means is that people who eat a high-fat diet, when they eat a carbohydrate-rich food, check their glucose 2 hours later, they look at their glucose meter and they're like, huh, see, I ate one banana and my blood glucose is 285. My blood glucose is a 12 or a 14. Okay. I told you bananas are bad for me. Potatoes are bad for me. I shouldn't eat those foods because if I do, my glucose goes high. And the real answer is, you know what? It's not the banana's fault. It's not the mango's fault. It's what came before those foods that set the stage for insulin resistance that inhibited glucose metabolism.
Yeah.
So that's how insulin resistance develops.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation, and thank you for that. And I really like the way that you emphasize about the fat that goes into your mouth, because you know that really, it's an empowering thing that, you know, when we realize that what we put in our mouth, like, we're in control. We can make decisions here, and it's up to us. It's not, you know, people, I think, with all sorts of chronic diseases, just feel totally powerless and feel like, oh, you just throw your hands in the air, just go to the doctor and get your pills and just, you know, live your life. And
so true.
And I like that. You emphasize that point of what goes in your mouth. That's a really important thing. Now,
absolutely.
for me, I didn't. I was probably, you know, pre-diabetic or something like that. I wasn't.
Right, I remember you saying that at the beginning of your journey.
Yeah. I was never like formally diagnosed and on like drugs for that, but I definitely had high blood sugar, and yeah, that was a problem. And my first sort of brush with diabetes, I remember vividly. I got an email from a guy shortly after my story went viral, and I had no interest. I was not at that point in time really helping other people or whatever. I was just doing my own thing. But I got an email from a bloke who wrote to me and said, he'd been type 2 diabetic for over 30 years. He'd followed all of his doctor's instructions. He'd tried all sorts of different diets as well, and he'd tried all sorts of different methods to deal with his diabetes, and nothing had ever worked. And then he saw me on the news and thought, oh, that's pretty weird and strange, but it makes sense, and I'll give it a try. So 30 years of type 2 diabetes, 2 weeks of only potatoes, and he was off all his diabetic medication, no longer on insulin or anything. And he wrote to me, and just to thank me. That was the first contact I'd had from him, was that he'd just done this 2 weeks and was totally free of his diabetic symptoms and no need for any medication. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then that got me researching a little bit more into diabetes. And obviously since then I've dealt with a lot of people, but anyway, that remains, that was the first contact I'd had with that sort of story. And it remains the coolest one, that like 30 years and then all done in 2 weeks. That was pretty amazing. So I'm curious about, you know, some amazing stories that you, obviously there's your own personal story, which is pretty incredible, but, you know, how did this transfer from, so this is a 2-part question, I guess. How did it transfer from becoming something that you were interested in for yourself to then becoming something that you're doing to help other people? And have you got a highlight or two of people that you've helped?
100%. So your story is actually pretty reminiscent of a research paper that was written in 1979 It's a guy named James W. Anderson, and he performed an experiment where he did exactly what you just described. He took people who were using insulin. Okay, these are not people with type 1, but these are people with type 2 diabetes who were using insulin to control their blood glucose. And what he did is he prevented them from losing any weight. He said, you can come into my study and I'm going to teach you how to eat a whole food plant-based diet, but you cannot lose a single pound. If you lose any weight, I'm going to kick you out of my study. And people were like, okay. So he was literally like force feeding people like salads and starchy vegetables and fruits. And people were like, oh my God, I'm so full. I don't want to eat anymore, right? He took people who had been living with insulin dependent type 2 diabetes for anywhere from a minimum of 1 year all the way upwards of 10 to 20 years. And he was able to discontinue insulin use in 50% of all of his patients.
Wow.
And he did it in 16 days.
Oh,
right.
amazing.
So you're talking about patients who are living just like your guy, right? He was living for 30 years and then he adopts a plant strong diet. And then all of a sudden, boom, 2 weeks later, now off 100% of medication. So what I don't want people to walk away from this interview thinking is, okay, great. All I have to do is eat a plant-based diet for 2 weeks and then I will be off all my medications. The answer is that can happen. It absolutely can happen, but I can't predict whether that's going to happen in you or somebody else. The only way to actually know how long it's going to take and how long you can stay off of your medications is to experiment and do it in a very systematic approach. And so, when people come into, we have a coaching program. It's called Mastering Diabetes. And people will come into our coaching program and we literally walk them through a series of lifestyle changes that involve a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, plus exercise, plus intermittent fasting. And when they incorporate each one of these methods into their lives, they find that, they lose weight tremendously. Their blood glucose stabilizes very quickly. Their need for insulin as well as oral medications comes down dramatically. And their energy levels go up very repeatedly. So, we have people who have type 2 diabetes. As an example, Raj is a perfect story. He had type 2 diabetes plus an enlarged liver. So he was on his way to fatty liver disease. He lost something on the order of between 65 and 80 pounds within the first 6 to 8 months. He reversed fatty liver disease. He reversed type 2 diabetes. And he is a completely reborn man altogether. His son used to make fun of him because his son was like, oh, Dad, you can't play basketball with me anymore. You're too slow. And then all of a sudden now he's running circles around his own kids. Right. Awesome. Then we have people like, there's another guy named Christopher, and Christopher is living with type 1 diabetes, similar to us. He, over the course of time, became dramatically overweight. He ended up adopting a plant-based diet. He lost 85 pounds. He reversed rheumatoid arthritis, which he had been living with for many years. Okay. There's also another gentleman named Clint Pattison who has a program to teach people how to reverse rheumatoid arthritis as well.
Yeah, he's a friend.
He's a friend, yeah. And he's from Australia. He's a brilliant guy. So, an autoimmune condition, which is considered irreversible, not true. It is absolutely reversible. So Chris lost 85 pounds, reversed rheumatoid arthritis, got off of medication for high cholesterol, multiple medications, multiple medications for blood pressure. And he now, the only thing that he uses is insulin because he has type 1 diabetes and he has to. Yeah. His insulin use has come down dramatically. So like he's completely reborn from the inside, right? And there's, story after story of individuals who are making dramatic improvements in their diet and seeing dramatic changes. And it's very, very repeatable and it's very fun to watch.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, I guess if you're like me, I get not diabetes because that's not my focus, but I get stories every day from people that have had amazing results in a whole heap of different ways. And I never get tired of it, and I'm sure you never will either.
No, you can't.
Yeah. So we should wrap up in a sec, but I've got a couple more questions. First of all, can you give us just a quick example of what? Well, I guess I was going to say what the ultimate diabetes diet is, but I guess it's probably what you eat. So can you tell us a little bit about what you eat in a day?
For sure. So what I eat in a day, basically, I love to eat lots of fruit. So in the same way that you like to eat a lot of potatoes, right? And that's what you did for a full year. And now you still choose to put a lot of potatoes into your diet. I'm similar, but I'm with plantains and mangoes and papayas. That's what I choose to eat a lot of.
Yeah.
So on a daily basis, I'm eating something like 4 to 5 mangoes. I'm eating, 6 to 8 plantains. I eat, maybe 1 or 2 of those big Meridol papayas. I'll have maybe like 1 to 2 servings, 1 to 2 cups worth of chickpeas. I'll have a little bit of quinoa. I will also have lots of vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers and broccoli and cauliflower. So the way that my day usually works out is it's pretty fruit heavy in the morning, then it's fruit heavy in the middle of the day, and then over the course of the day, I sort of transition towards more vegetables because I want to make sure I have enough energy to keep me going, to have me cognitively active, and to be able to perform exercise in the beginning of the day. And then towards the end of the day, I'm a little bit more sedentary, so I take on less energy, eat a little bit more vegetables, and I call it a day. So the cool thing is that I'm able to put down 3,000 calories per day eating that way, and I've never felt better.
Yeah, that's great. And it's sort of from a macronutrient point of view, it's similar to the way I eat. I eat a lot of potatoes, like you said, but through the first breakfast, lunch, afternoon, I'll eat lots of potatoes and lots of fruit as well, and lots of carbohydrate kind of foods. And then, the vegetables and the other foods come later around dinner time and that sort of thing. So, interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
We're sort of following a similar plan along that as far as the
For
macronutrient
sure.
content, even though you're focusing on fruit and I'm focusing on potatoes. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
2 more questions. One is that I did know, but I actually forgot that you'd experienced Hashimoto's, and that's another thing that I get a lot of questions about. So can we very briefly just talk about that? I'm
for sure.
Your experience with that, because I have
so
experienced it. I have no experience with it, but I have helped a lot of people who have, they've not come to me thinking that I'm the Hashimoto's guy. They just want to deal with food addiction and that sort of thing. And Hashimoto's is something that improves along with that. So maybe you can shed a little light on that.
For sure. So Hashimoto's hypothyroidism is basically just a really complicated super nerd way of referring to autoimmune thyroid dysfunction. So if your thyroid gland experiences an autoimmune attack in the same way that the beta cells in your pancreas can experience an autoimmune attack, then the antibodies that your immune system is manufacturing basically go and target specific cells in your thyroid gland. And the result of that is that your thyroid hormone output goes down. Now, thyroid hormone is like one of the most important hormones in your body for thousands of reasons. The amount of thyroid hormone you produce controls everything from your energy levels to your temperature sensitivity, to your appetite, to your weight, to your ability to maintain hair growth, to the color of your skin, to your digestion. It is a master hormone. And so when you decrease the amount of thyroid in your blood, then the common symptoms are, number 1, very low energy, number 2, weight gain, and number 3, hair loss. And so, if you have any of those symptoms or a collection of those symptoms, then that could be an indicator that you are, experiencing hypothyroidism. The beauty of hypothyroidism, I'd say there's 2 things. Number 1, it's easily treatable with pharmaceutical medication. Okay, I'm not a huge fan of pharmaceutical medication in general, but in this particular situation, you can go to your doctor and your doctor can prescribe you any number of different thyroid medications, and the thyroid medication can bring your thyroid hormone level back up to what's considered normal. And as a result of that, you then regain your energy and you're able to lose weight one more time and your hair starts to grow back, start to feel a lot better. Okay, and majority of the world that experiences Hashimoto's takes that route because they're never presented with any other option. But the other option is to clean up your diet because there's actually a strong connection between what you put in your body and how your thyroid gland behaves. Packaged and processed foods have a detrimental impact on your thyroid hormone supply. And so people who eat a lot of packaged and processed foods end up having poor thyroid health. So the simplest thing that you can do is literally try and get rid of as many packaged and processed foods as possible. There's also people who have a connection between their thyroid gland and their gluten tolerance. So many people who are gluten intolerant end up having Hashimoto's hypothyroidism at the same time. And so if you have a gluten sensitivity or a gluten intolerance, then that can affect the function of your thyroid gland as well. when you eat a whole food plant-based diet, what I have observed is that your thyroid hormone output by your thyroid gland goes up just a little bit. So in other words, if you start using 150 micrograms of thyroid hormone per day, that number can come down to 125, 100, maybe 75. You can cut it down dramatically. Okay. I have not seen or ever been convinced by research that shows that people who are living with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism can reverse it repeatably in the way that, we said in 80 to 90% of all cases, you can reverse type 2 diabetes. I wish Hashimoto's hypothyroidism was that easy to reverse. What I have seen is that people who get diagnosed early in the disease process and they make a change to their diet immediately, they are the ones that are able to technically reverse Hashimoto's and get to a normal thyroid hormone output. But people who have been living with Hashimoto's for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then find out about it and then start taking thyroid hormone, it's much more challenging in those situations. The point being is that a whole food plant-based diet is a phenomenal way to improve the quality of the nutrients that go into your mouth and to reduce the amount of thyroid hormone that you will need in order to control your thyroid, concentration in your blood.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, that's without knowing that sort of detail that you just went through, that's something that I've seen in a lot of people that I've helped have been able to greatly reduce medication.
Yeah.
Same. It's not common. I have heard from people that have got off medication for it, but it's not common. But yeah, there's so many other benefits with this lifestyle as well. So
totally.
That's
yeah.
all right. Last question.
Yeah.
Last question for you. We've gone a little bit longer than we planned, but yeah, it's I couldn't leave you without asking you, if somebody wants to learn more about diabetes and manage their own diabetes better and come to understand things a lot better, is there a particular book you could recommend?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So we actually just wrote this book right here, and I'm going to put it on the screen. It's called Mastering Diabetes. It's written by me and then my business partner, Robby. And the subtitle is The Revolutionary Method to Reverse Insulin Resistance Permanently in Type 1, Type 1.5, Type 2 prediabetes, and gestational diabetes. So regardless of the type of diabetes you're living with, this book is designed to be a how-to manual to teach you why a plant-based diet is going to be so effective and how to actually make that transition. This book came out on February 18th of this last year, 2020. And in the first week, this book became a New York Times bestseller.
Oh, really?
And I'm over the moon about this. I am so happy about this. And so this book is changing the lives of thousands of people in a very short period of time. And this book is going to continue to travel far as a result of that. So if you are living with diabetes or somebody living with diabetes, I highly recommend going to pick up a copy of this book. For your listeners in Australia, there's 3 places you can go to get this book. Number 1 is Amazon Australia. You can just look for Mastering Diabetes and it'll pop up. Number 2 is a place called Book Depository, and that's online. Book Depository will ship it directly to Australia within 3 to 5 days. And then the third one is called, I'm forgetting the name. Don't worry about the third one. But what is it?
Would it be Fish Pond?
It's not Fish Pond. Here, let me look this up real quick. I think.
No worries. Another thing that I recommend people would do would be a great thing and would be helpful to you guys as well. It'd be just to go to your local bookstore and order it and
there you go.
Try and get it onto bookshelves that way. And that way, maybe if you ask them to order 1 for you, maybe they'll order 3 and, put 2 on the shelf and 1 for you. So yeah, I think
there you go.
It's a really good thing for people to do as well.
It's a great idea. Booktopia, that's the name of it.
Oh,
Booktopia.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's a common site here too. Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for your time, and everyone watching, if you need help with diabetes, then contact the Robby and Cyrus at Mastering Diabetes, and of course buy the book and deal with your diabetes. Let's do it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. I appreciate you having us on or having me on today. And diabetes is solvable in many ways, so I'm glad we can help.
All right. Thanks for doing what you do, and all the best with the book.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. There you have it. Great guy, right? I love Cyrus. I love Robby as well. Maybe one day I'll get to talk to Robby, who is Cyrus's partner in Mastering Diabetes. But Yeah, I love Cyrus and I love his message, and I hope you enjoyed that interview, and I hope you share it with anyone you know who might benefit from learning that information. I hope you got something from it yourself, and again, click the links below if you're interested in finding out more about mastering diabetes. Spud up, everyone, and deal with your diabetes.